G'day guys, welcome back to the SuperCoach YouTube channel. Today we are going to be discussing what I'm calling the Ruck problem. So that's basically come from the fact that I am really struggling to pick Rucks in 2026 AFL SuperCoach. And there are a few reasons for that. But yeah, let's get into it. There is a little bit of a spoiler here. Yes, this player has no longer been selected in my side, Tristan Cherry, but we'll get to that later. So, typically in SuperCoach, the Ruck strategy has been very simple. You pick the two guys who you think are going to score the most. That's it. Set and forget. There's a few reasons for this. The main one is the captain's options. Rucks have been the highest scoring position in SuperCoach for a while now. And the Rucks give you the best captain's options. That, on top of the fact that if you pick a value Ruck and it goes wrong, you have to generally spend at least 2 trades to fix it because there are very, very few viable options. And they're generally all expensive. So those two combinations mean that, hey, I don't want to stuff around in the Rucks. I need captain's options anyway. I'm just going to put them in at R1 and R2. Makes total sense. There is the other one, the other small little caveat as well, where Rucks have historically been able to go on absolutely monster runs, like 135 plus, and price you out of them for a 6-week period, which can be very bad for your season and very difficult to watch. Now, that is how SuperCoach has been, and many are expecting that will not change, and that is why you will see that Tristan Cherry is about, I don't know what his selection is, it's about 50%, I believe. But yeah, that's Rucks historically. Why is that different this year? Well, we have the rule changes, which I think has been discussed a lot within the AFL Fantasy and the SuperCoach communities, but I don't think it's been explored absolutely fully yet. And I was watching an episode on the coaches panel in MJ's 50 Most Relevant about Tim English with a player from the AFL Fantasy community called Vams, I believe. Apologies if I'm wrong about that. I'm not in tune with the AFL Fantasy community. But they were really discussing the Ruck rules in relation to Tim English. And then I think 2 episodes later, he had Dylan Alexander on discussing Tristan Cherry. And so this has got my brain ticking into overtime about what the heck I'm going to do in the Ruck line. So let's get into the rule changes. So the first one, and I think this is the most important one, and I think it hasn't been explored fully yet, is actually the Ruck contesting rule. So 2 changes to this. Firstly, at the centre ball up, or whatever we're calling that, the Rucks cannot step over the white line, even 1 blade of grass, to contest the ball, and they must hit the ball before making contact with the other Ruckman. The second part is, in the around the ground contests, you can't do the stiff arm blocking, and you can't see my arms, but you can't do the stiff arm blocking and then the tapping, the uncontested tapping, essentially. So why is this relevant? So firstly, we've had Max Gawn on Triple M say that he himself has been struggling with this rule, and we have seen reports of Riley O'Brien really struggling with this rule as well in the intra-club matches. I'm sure there are other examples of it as well. I just haven't seen it. So what is this likely to mean? It's going to mean there's going to be a lot of free kicks from it, particularly early on as the ruckman adjust. And I think that, combined with the fact that when the AFL changes the rules, they are ruling the new rules with an absolute iron fist. So if you look back at when the descent rule was brought in and the stand rule was brought in, we had heaps and heaps of 50-metre penalties. There was no lenience. A lot of the times, I think we looked at it and we decided that the adjudications were even wrong, but they were still going for it. They were making sure that the fans and the player base understood what was happening with the new rules. And I think that's going to be the exact same with Ruck contests. We're going to see things in the Ruck contest that don't even look like free kicks, get paid as free kicks. Now, that is going to affect all the ruckmen. Some are going to adjust better than others, but the reality is that's going to happen. I am expecting to see 2+ additional free kicks in the first 6 weeks of the season per ruckman. So, and that's 4 points per free kick against for a clanger that you lose. So that's 8 points right there. We'll talk about that more when we get into the individual players. The other rule change that I think is might affect ruck scoring by maybe a couple of points, maybe 2 to 4 points a game, is the ball being immediately thrown up. A lot of the ruckmen just won't be fit enough to get there, for one. For two, a lot of the teams will probably split the ground up so that a forward takes ruck contests from X position on the ground forward. The third part is the rucks, when they get to the contest, in theory, will be gassed. They'll be more exhausted, they'll be more tired because they've had to exhaust more energy getting to that contest than when they could just lumber there for 30 seconds. Why does that matter? Because that means that at the contest, there's going to be less opportunities for them to score in the fact that they're going to be too tired to, lay an effective tackle, or maybe they lay a tackle that's sloppy because they're tired, or maybe when they get the ball, they're too exhausted to make a decision quickly, or they kick the ball away and it's a claim because they're not thinking, or they're more tired and their skills aren't as good. So I think that is actually relevant for that reason as well. And then the last rule change that I think affects rucks is the last touch out of bounds. I'm not anticipating this to really impact the number of contests in of itself much. I think we're going to lose maybe 2 to 3 contests per game. Whatever. I'm not even going to worry about that rule. Just thought I would mention it. So, as I said, the biggest impact of these rule changes is going to be the ruck rules, the ruck contesting rule, as I'm calling it, where there's going to be heaps of free kicks early in the season. And the fans are going to hate it, and we're going to get to round 6 or 7, and apologies, not trying to make a 6-7 joke. We're going to get to round 8, and the AFL is going to wind back the interpretation. We've seen it every time a new rule comes in. The AFL gets to a point where they're like, all right, this is a little bit unwatchable. We're winding it back. We're going to get there again. But that is really relevant at the start of the season, because if it takes around 6 to get to there, all of a sudden we're starting to upgrade. And if these players, because of the rule changes, are scoring 8 less points per game, all of a sudden there's going to be a huge amount of value to upgrade into at that time. It also means that these guys are going to drop cash at the start of the season. So do you really want to start the guys who are going to, drop so much cash? I'm not convinced. That's part of the reason Tristan Cherry is not in my side. I do think Tristan Cherry is going to be the most impacted by these rules. I'll get into why I think that. But yeah, I think it's worth noting that as the season goes on, the rucks will adjust. And I think that we're going to look at the back end of the season and say, hey, look, across the course of the year, this has affected ruck scoring maybe by 3 or 4 points per game. But I think it's going to be really heavily skewed at the start of the season. So yeah, that's my hypothesis at the very least. Let's get into some individual players. So I'm going to start with Tristan Cherry because I think this is the most contentious one for a few reasons. Firstly, many players in the community view Cherry as being underpriced based on 4 injury-affected games last year. The 3 at the start of the year where he did his hamstring, like a twinge, I guess, played through it, but there was clearly awareness. He was grabbing at it a lot. And then there was a game against Melbourne in the back half of the year where he was concussed. So obviously people think he's value. Now, I want to discuss why I think that he may not be valued. And obviously there's a very good fixture, which I will get to at the end. But this is why I don't think he will be valued. So 82% of Tristan Cherry's AFL fantasy scoring, different to SuperCoach, I know, is from contests. So there are 2 score sources. I'm using Jaden Popowski's website, which is very good for score sources. So there is stoppages and transitions, stoppages or contests, whatever. Tristan Cherry is the highest points per game and percentage of scores coming from stoppages. 82% in fantasy, as I mentioned. Worth noting, AFL Fantasy does not have hit-outs to advantage and does not have clangers as score metrics. So this is likely even more skewed towards contest scoring for Tristan Cherry. Now, why is that relevant? Because if the contests drop, in theory, his scoring is going to drop the most. And if the contests drop, by that I mean, if the contests he gets to drops, his scoring stands the most. He stands the most to lose in terms of his scoring. So that's what I think. Again, this high ratio of scoring from stoppages makes sense on the eye. Average 6.6 tackles per game, and is not really an around-the-ground contested mark beast like someone like a Max Gawn is. Makes sense. So, as I said, if the ruck contests drop that Cherry gets to, it is very likely that his scoring will suffer the most compared to all the other ruckmen. So that's red flag number one. And again, I'm speaking in hypotheticals. I think it's worth planning for this because I don't think we're really going to see it in the State of Origin game tonight. We may not really see it in the preseason matches, but we will see it in opening round when it's right before you have to lock out your team. So I think having a plan for, okay, the ruck rules are going to affect the rucks versus, okay, the ruck rules are not going to affect the rucks. I think having those two plans is a really good idea, and that's why I'm having this discussion. So let's have a look at some year-to-year comparisons for Cherry, who's now been a premium ruckman for 2 years. So his SuperCoach scoring average increased by 7.1 points per game in 2025. Pretty sizable jump, I would say. And then this was mainly due to a large drop in clangers, which was 1.6 per game. If you run the numbers, that is pretty much entirely from clangers. His AFL fantasy average, though, dropped by 9.5 points per game. I don't have the reason for that. But that is interesting because rucks tend to be the exception to this rule, but generally when fantasy scoring drops, so does SuperCoach scoring. Now, I would suggest his hit out to advantage rate increased, which is part of the reason for this as well. Anyway. So I want to focus on his clangers because last year Tristan Cherry averaged 3.3 clangers per game. And as I said, it dropped from 1.6. So the year he had 1.6 clangers per game, that's about 5 per game total. That was virtually the highest number of clangers in the league. Obviously, as he's improved, it's dropped a little bit to 3.3. That is still about 1 clanger per game less than the 3 main ruckmen from last year, which were Gawn, Grundy, and Marshall, who are all 4.3, 4.4, and 4.2 clangers per game each. So the reason I'm highlighting this is I think Cherry had a low clanger year last year, and that may increase by half a clanger per game. It is worth noting that Gawn, Grundy, and Marshall did have more disposals per game than Cherry, which obviously some of the clangers situation comes from disposals. As such, I may be reaching, you may view that, but I do think that some regression in Cherry's clangers will come naturally, regardless of the new rules. So that's point number one. Point number two is the tackles, which dropped by 0.9 per game. That's 3 to 4 points per game. Kind of whatever. I did suggest last year that the tackles would regress. I was right. I think this is likely to regress further this year because of the points I mentioned earlier. Free kicks potentially at contests, it's going to stifle a lot of them. And Cherry being more exhausted at each contest he gets to. Again, hypothesizing, he will likely get to less contests, but he could just be fresher for the contest he's at because he's not having to get to the forward half contests as well. Totally up in the air. I want to point out that there is a source on Twitter that has quoted Todd Viney saying that they are considering playing an extra ruck forward to complement Cherry. Worth noting with this source, I believe it's AFL ratings. It's typically quite clickbaity. They're trying to get clicks into their website, so they don't really give you the whole picture. So just be very careful when you listen to things like that. It's probably taken a little bit out of context and it may not be true. Obviously, we will get to see that if a Callum Coleman-Jones or a Taylor Goad gets selected, then we know that's on the cards. And then I think more will be scared off from Tristan Cherry then. So I just want to also do a little bit of numbers. So for example, going back to the free kicks, I mentioned that I think each ruckman could see an additional 2 frees against per game at the start of the season. Ignoring scaling, that is minus 8 points. If he drops by a tackle as well, which is 4 points, just by the fact that he's either getting to less contests or more tired at the contests he gets to, he's going to drop by 12 points per game, just then and there. Now, that is a lot. For the way I do Supercoach scoring in my head is that like every 50k is about 10 points worth of scoring. So, for example, a guy going 120 is about priced at 600 he's about priced at 600,000 at the midpoint of the season as the magic number drops. So 10 points is about 50k. What if it's more than that? What if he's getting to so much less contests that his possessions drop, his tackles drop, he's giving away a couple extra free kicks because of the new ruck rules. Like, there's scope for his scoring to drop quite a bit. And I also think that Cherry, and Grundy's another example of this, they seem more susceptible to giving frees away because they're more physical, and a lot of their value to their side is actually in the follow-up work and acting as like a big sort of bodied enforcer type midfielder when the ball hits the deck. So that's my fear with Cherry. Now, I think a lot of people will sit here and say to me, "Oh, fine, you're overreacting," and that's fine. If that's your belief, that's fine. But I think having the plan for in case what you don't think will happen happens. That sentence was a mess, but I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. I think that is really important because I think whoever gets the ruck right this year will have a huge advantage, and I don't think it's far from simple. The ruck contests are far from simple this year. The ruck position. So the counterpoint to Cherry not being a good pick is that his early fixture is incredibly cupcake. This is who he's playing, so it looks like he's going to get Port round 1, so that is looking like being Dante Vicentini. Can't imagine Dante's hard to score against, don't have the numbers on it. We'll see. Matt Flynn, easiest ruckman to score against last year, was West Coast. Essendon, it's going to be either Blackiston or a very fresh Nick Bryan. Then he's got Pitternet in round 4 against Carlton. Pitternet's generally pretty banged up. It could even be Liam Reedy in theory. Then round 5, you're going to get either an Underdone Draper or a Darcy Fort. Round 6, you get Richmond and Nankervis. Round 7, you get presumably Briggs. And then round 8, you get Geelong. That is numbers rank 1 to 8 for the easiest ruck matchups. It could not get better than that for Tristan Cherry. Now, if you think under the old rules, he's very likely to average 140 in that run, and he loses 10 points, all of a sudden he's back averaging what he's priced at. But then if you think the rules aren't going to affect his scoring at all, then like obviously you're starting Tristan Cherry. Like there's no argument there. Whether you're starting Tristan Cherry totally comes down to how much you think the rules will affect the rucks. 100%. That's the Cherry discussion. I'm going to talk about a few more. I will say I'm not talking about Luke Jackson because I think Luke Jackson is clearly R1 if Sean Darcy goes down for an extended period of time. I'm at the point where if Sean Darcy goes down for 6 weeks, I'll probably just start Luke Jackson. Like that's how much belief I have in him and how much confusion I have in the rest of the ruck line. So that's why I'm not talking about Luke Jackson. So I'm going to talk about some more expensive options and then we'll talk about some cheaper guys as well. So Max Gawn, he is R1 in AFL SuperCoach last year, the greatest ruckman of all time, particularly for SuperCoach and fantasy scoring. 58% of Max Gawn's scoring comes from contests. It makes sense that his is more skewed to transition because everyone who has ever played through a season of SuperCoach and not owned Max Gawn for a portion knows that when he starts taking contested marks late in the games, you are in trouble, and it happens frequently, particularly in close games. So, passes the eye test there. I do think that as the ruck rules have changed previously, Gawn has been one of the rucks that has adapted the best. And if you think about it, given how good he is around the ground and the fact that he's more of a jumping ruckman, bit older now, I understand that, but like I remember, when he was much younger, he would be jumping into the ruck contest, getting up high, and just like it's silver service to his midfielders. It makes sense that he would adjust well to the rule changes. Now, he did himself say that he was struggling with them, but there's still time. And, as I said, I think the rule changes will affect all of them, particularly at the start of the season, all of the rucks. Lots of data on Max Gawn, not going to do any comparisons, but the real question marks with Gawn are, is this new, young Melbourne midfield going to compete well enough at stoppages to allow Gawn to score via hit-outs to advantage and in other ways at the stoppage? I think that if Steele is healthy, I think that his scoring won't really be affected by that. But if Steele is not healthy, I think Gawn could be in trouble. The other question is, will Melbourne rest Gawn or manage his minutes at some point? I've been under the belief that they will. I think that this year is going to be like a really resetting year for Melbourne. And then next year they're going to say, okay, like what's the limit for us? Can we push finals now that 10 teams are in there? Can we push more than that? Like, I think that's the reality with Melbourne. And I think that having Gawn healthier for longer makes the most sense for that. Like, I don't see the point in, taking your club champion and, giving him 23 games at full minutes for a season where you're not really aiming for finals anyway. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And then the other one for Gawn is the age regression. I think he's 34 now. Like, rucks tend to regress. Like, the cliff for rucks comes much later generally, but in theory it will come at some point. As I said, logic would suggest that Gawn will adjust well to the new rules. He's extremely fit, so the work rate required to get to all the contests you would think wouldn't be in question. Good jumping ruckman. I think Gawn will adjust well. My fear with Gawn is the minutes restriction. Like, will he get managed? That's my concern with Max Gawn. Brodie Grundy, 70% of AFL fantasy scoring comes from ruck contests. Makes sense. As I said, Grundy's strength is really the follow-up work, not the around the ground contested marking. My main issue with Grundy is that I think that last year, the last 15 weeks where he went 140 or something, I think that was a cupcake run. He got north when Cherry was injured, or suspended, I can't remember. He played, he just had a cupcake run. It was just so easy. And that happens every year. One or two ruckmen just go on runs where the opposing ruckmen just fall over. You'll get Jared Witts out, you'll get Tristan Cherry suspended. These sorts of things happen. And yeah, I just don't think that run is anything like representative of what Grundy's capable of. The other issue is that Sydney is, the noise coming out of Sydney is that their ball movement profile is much faster. Now, rucks don't get involved in transition anyway, so why is this relevant? It could lead to less stoppages in theory. Maybe it's 2 or 3 per game. Again, we're not talking much, but just food for thought. All right, the next one I want to talk about is Tim English, who's currently in my side, but I'm not very confident on. As I've said in the past, I hate watching Tim English. He's very frustrating, but I do think the new rules help him get less bullied, which has been the main problem with English. So 60% of Tim English's scoring comes from stoppages. That actually surprised me. He gets used as a connecting player at times for the Dogs. Obviously, we've seen the footage of him taking the kick in that one game against Hawthorn in Tasmania. But they actually use him like a midfielder, which I think is interesting. He could get involved in some of those transition chains. But yeah, I was surprised about the ruck scoring because we think about Tim English and we tend to think, hey, he's getting bullied at these ruck contests. So yeah, I don't know. That surprised me. I think his hit out to advantage rate is quite good, despite his hit out win percentage rate not being that good. How do I think the rule changes will affect him? Okay, firstly, if you hear Tim English speak, he sounds really, really intelligent. Now, if you want to give any stock to that or not is up to you. I'm giving stock to that in the fact that I think he will be able to put into place a strategy to mitigate freeze against due to the new rules better because he is smarter. Now, that might just be an absolute reach, fair enough, but it is worth noting, Tim English is one of the rucks that gives away the fewest free kicks in the entire league, not just fantasy relevant rucks. So I think the stats kind of back me up there, but again, I'm probably grasping a little bit, grasping at the straws. I do also think that Tim English, his around the ground work is quite good. He generally pushes forward to kick goals as well. He's one of the best rucks at doing that. He's also a good user, the best ruck in terms of usage, just on the eye. And I do think that being fitter will help Tim English a lot with the new rules. As I said, he's going to get to more contests based on that. If he's getting to contests with the other ruckman who he's leading around the ground, his hit out win percentage rate could increase and his hit out to advantage rate is already high. So, maybe he gets another 2 to 3 hit outs to advantage per game. All of a sudden, that's 15 points. Well, it's 12 if you're going to win the hit out anyway, but that is a lot of points. So I think the obvious upside is there with English, and his real weakness was when they changed the rules to allow the rucks to grapple more and to be more physical. So I think English is really well positioned within the new rules. Again, you have to ask yourself if the new rules will affect the rucks at all. I think they will. You may not. But Tim English, I really like if the ruck rules do affect the rucks. Now, there's one that I have been really against for the entire of the preseason, and I'm starting to come around to it, and not for an obvious reason. So that is Tom De Koning. Now, 67% of Tom De Koning's AFL fantasy scoring last season came from ruck contests. I don't really want to give too much stock to this. De Koning was injured for half the season playing through it and very obviously checked out at Carlton. It is what it is. Now, if we look at Tom De Koning's athletic profile, his tap work is really good. High hit out win percentage rate, high hit out to advantage rate. Now, that's going to be helped when the other rucks can't just grapple him and lock him down. So, there's a tick there. His around the ground work for marking is also quite good. And I think the only reason that Tom De Koning isn't more highly owned is the fact that Rowan Marshall is there. So I want to talk about the red flags a little bit. So that Rowan Marshall red flag is very real and it is very relevant. What do we think is going to happen with Rowan Marshall and Tom De Koning? Reports at the moment are suggesting that TDK may get like a 75% ruck split and Marshall may play 25% forward. Now, that's probably good enough to pick, to be honest, but you just don't know if that is going to change at some point during the season. Like, if TDK drops down to 60% at some point, it's very unlikely he's going to be able to score premium numbers with 60% ruck contests. So there is that. My other concern with TDK is his ability to actually get to the contests around the ground. He didn't strike me as being particularly fit last season. Again, playing through injuries a lot. Had that larynx injury, which probably makes it harder to breathe. So maybe I'm speculating a little bit there, but that was what I thought. It is worth noting that he also has a good fixture early, Tom De Koning and the Saints for rucks. We're going to get to see everything about Tom De Koning in the opening round game. So I think having this discussion is not overly relevant. The main piece with Tom De Koning that I wanted to discuss is that if you think the ruck rules are really going to affect these guys, like 100k, like 20 points per game, I don't think it'll be that much. I think it might be 15 early before, regressing to maybe 3 or 4 points. But if you think the rules are really going to affect them, starting a guy who, even though he's affected by the ruck rules, that won't actually drop in price is kind of making you 100k anyway. So just to put numbers on this, if you think the ruck rules are going to affect Tristan Cherry by 20 points per game at the start of the season, that means that he will drop 100k in price. If Tom De Koning, whilst affected by the ruck rules, because he is value, holds cash, you've actually made 100k when you trade him to Tristan Cherry if you think that Tristan Cherry is going to be a top 3 ruck. I would assume Tristan Cherry, regardless of the rule changes, will be a top 3 ruck. I just don't think he'll be 1 or 2. So that's an interesting way of looking at it, I think. The value guys are very interesting based on that because, if they make 100k and the ruck when you're trying to get to drops 100k, all of a sudden you've made 200k over that transaction. Now, obviously in SuperCoach and AFL Fantasy, we are trading into guys who have dropped money. They're never max price when we trade into them. But if the rucks are going to be volatile and they're all going to lose money anyway, then that trade-off is still worth it. You get a little bit less cash, but you haven't absorbed the massive loss of cash as well. So that's my thought process with rucks this year. If I can start a value guy who makes 60, 70k, I'm taking that as a bit of a win because I'm really concerned about what the max price guys are going to drop and score. So that's my view. That's why I'm interested in Tom De Koning. That's the main piece. Even at 560, if he maintains his price, I can very easily probably get to Tristan Cherry when he drops to 600k, which could happen quite early. And then the rule changes get softened, less free kicks. That's my view. Now, there are more cheaper options. I'm going to start with Dante Vicentini, who yesterday in the Port Intra-Club Match Sim got the better of Jordan Sweet. Now, the big fear with Dante Vicentini is that Jordan Sweet will just come in after a poor week. It could happen. You are taking on that risk if you have Dante Vicentini. I will say with Vicentini, and you're about to see a little bit of a spoiler, but he is currently in my side. There is some decent scoring when he's played. So we've got 98, 84, 66. I believe these games were solo. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they were solo. Potentially this 74 as well. He is priced at 55. So if he scores anything like that, that'd be good. 2024 as well, when he came onto the scene, 75 and 94. So it stands to reason that he's probably not going to average less than 70 playing solo ruck, which is only 15 points of upside. It's about 75k of cash. But as I said, I'm kind of willing to take the punt on that this season because I do think the top guys are going to struggle to score early as they adjust to the rules. So that's why I have Dante Vicentini. The other one that I would be most interested in is a guy that Essendon has very clearly backed in to be the man going forward, which is Nick Bryan. Very highly rated in the VFL, but coming off a serious... was this guy? This guy was knee, I think. I think he was ACL, so likely not available for round 1. Don't know what that means. If he's named round 1, I will pick him because I think they're just going to give him the keys, really. Like, Blackiston, from the reports at Essendon's training, the ruck position is very, very, very concerning for them at the moment for the track watchers. So, yeah, I think Nick Bryan gets the nod as soon as he's fit. And they go from there. The other one that we saw yesterday was Lachlan McAndrew, who's currently sitting at my flex position. He was much better in the contests than Riley O'Brien was yesterday. I didn't watch much of this game, but when I did, that was true, and I've seen other reports that was the case. Now, the concern with McAndrew is, does he get into the fourth quarter of a game and just shut down because he doesn't have the fitness level or the fitness base that Riley O'Brien has? I'm not sure. I think he's too risky to go at R2. But if you start him at R2 and it works, you're going to be pretty far ahead, I think. So McAndrew, very interesting. You may like him at R3, totally up to you. I've got Liam Reedy here. I don't know. This guy's he's a donkey. Like, let's be honest. Like, this 34 against Geelong, which is the only exposed form we have on him at AFL level, he was so bad. Like, I just couldn't, it was like they were down a player. He was actually that bad. Now, he's had another year to develop. I don't know what happens, but I just, for some reason, I have no faith in him. If he gets number 1 ruck, I think there's a real world where he averages 45. Like genuinely. I think he's going to struggle that much. So I don't really want to speak about him that much, but I do think he'll come in at some point because Mark Pittonet, unfortunately, gets injured a fair bit. So that's what I think about Reedy. The next one I've got is the Duff man, Cooper Duff-Tytler. Kicked 5 in the Eagles Injury Club. Yesterday, he was playing on Harry Taylor. Yes, that is the former Geelong player, Harry Taylor, who won, I don't know how many premierships, but he won a few of them. The guy... I think I was watching George's video of the practice match recap. I think he described Harry Taylor as being old enough to be Cooper Duff-Tyler's dad. So yeah, that sort of sums up that matchup. Really not buying into any of that. He's too expensive to pick an undersized ruckman forward in his first year. Not interested for mine. Now, I've got some more speculative type picks. The first one, I'm going to talk about the GWS ruck situation. So I've got Kieran Briggs here. The rules do not suit Kieran Briggs, and he has really battled with his body. I think there is no chance he ever gets back to that, whatever he scored in 23, which was 109, when he came in as a rookie that I didn't own and absolutely burnt me. Anyway, so I don't think Briggs is going to be an option. The one I do like... well, I don't like, but I'm thinking is Nick Madden, priced at 60, played 3 games last season, went 81, 78, 99. I believe this was Vicentini, Fort, Moyle. So easy matchups, but he's been there for a while. He kicked 5 in the match sim. He wasn't playing ruck the whole time, so I'm just going to dispel that myth. But maybe this is his year. Nick Madden's year. Just one to watch. So the next one I've got is Callum Coleman-Jones, who is ruck only, which sort of surprises me, but there are signs suggesting that... excuse me, better drink some water. There are signs suggesting that Callum Coleman-Jones may play to support Tristan Cherry. And North may go to a 3 tall system. I don't really love that for North, I must be honest. I think they're better off just either dropping Jack Darling and playing Callum Coleman-Jones. I'm a big believer in, particularly when you've got capable mid-sized forwards like Cam Zurha, I'm a big believer in limiting the number of talls you have down there. I know a lot of coaches disagree with me because we see it at selection, but typically they're not the coaches who are winning flags, so that's all I'll say. But Callum Coleman-Jones, keep him on your radar. I think there's a reasonable chance he's pickable. I want to talk about Moyle. I can't remember what his first name is. Ned Moyle, that's right. Priced at 60. I don't see Witts getting dropped. I think it's very unlikely. Witts is a very good ruckman. I don't think the new rules will hurt him that much, given how tall he is. Can't jump is what it is. But Moyle may play if Witts goes down. He's probably a little bit expensive to try and trade into, but food for thought. Ned Reeves is rumoured to be playing for the Hawks. Now, he's priced at 45. I just want to really point out that Ned Reeves playing solo ruck has never averaged more than 67. 64, 66. Oh no, there's 82 here. Okay, but it's a 5-game sample size. We're ignoring that. Okay, so 67. He's never averaged more than that. I don't think this is a pick. If whatever happens, he does get solo ruck. Maybe he's dropped some price by playing a lot of time on the bench. I don't know. Don't think he's a pick. The last one I want to give you is Louis Emmett from the Dogs, who's been training as a defender, 113.5k. Maybe this guy gets up and he gets a run in Bevo's backline. I would be very surprised to see him ahead of Jed Busslinger at this point. Maybe Busslinger and Emmett get a run. I don't know. That Dogs defense is a little bit diabolical, so there's definitely scope. I think we could all believe that that is possible. So they're the names that I wanted to discuss. Just as a bit of a conclusion, I am not sure how the ruck rules will affect the rucks. No one is. We need opening round to see it. We're realistically not going to see it tonight in the Origin game and not going to see it in the preseason games. We need opening round. But opening round is so late in the game in terms of the preseason that I think it is very worthwhile to have a backup plan in case what you think will happen doesn't happen. So, for example, I think the rucks are going to drop price. So I have Dante Vicentini at R2 and Tim English at R1. I will have a team ready with Tristan Cherry at R1 and no Dante Vicentini if I don't think the ruck rules are going to affect the rucks. That's my plan. I would highly advise everyone watching to make a similar plan. I do think the ruck rules will have more of an effect than a lot of the community has given it credit for at this point. That's the challenge this season. The challenge is in the ruck. That is where the challenge is. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you took away some things for your team building as we go through the preseason. I will try and pop out another video next week on premiums because I think the premium discussion is similarly interesting this year due to the round 12 bye and the number of early bye teams that we have this year. So yeah, I'm going to be discussing that as well. There will be no team update between now and then because my team is an absolute zoo at the moment. As you can see, Dante Vicentini is in there. There are some other speculative mid-prices that I have probably overreacted to the preseason games that we have seen, the intra-club ones. But yeah, so I can't in good faith do a team update until we get 1 week of preseason games, and then I'll do that. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.